And all they should be hoping to do is have someone to sit with at lunch or someone to play with on the playground. And yet again, like clockwork, half of the politicians in our country have little more to offer than thoughts and prayers. That is all they are offering. And then comes the attempt to shift the focus. This is what always happens. You're going to start seeing narratives. You're already seeing them. They're already out there about how the shooter was trans. You're going to see narratives about how the shooter appeared to be anti-Trump and anti-Semitic. The United States not only has the highest rate of gun violence of any country in the world, it's become a leading cause of death for young people and teenagers in this country. That should make everybody angry. Weaponizing the shooter's identity is meant to distract from what matters. That is what they are doing, trying to distract from what matters.
So just 24 hours after the horrific and tragic mass shooting that we witnessed at the Catholic elementary school in Minneapolis, Minnesota, the Democrat reactions to it all have somehow gotten worse. They have somehow become more dishonest, more shameless, and more simply disgusting. Because on one hand, these people refuse to acknowledge basic facts about what happened. It is a known fact by now that the shooter who did this was indeed a transgender individual who was clearly radicalized. The FBI is currently investigating it as a hate crime because, after all, it seems obvious, does it not? When you write a manifesto like that, when you write blank Donald Trump on allegedly the magazines of your rifle, when this comes obviously after a long string of several different cases of radical trans people trying to commit hate crimes or mass shootings against Christian children, what should happen now, I kid you not, we actually have people coming out here calling us far-right conspiracy theorists for floating the idea that this was a hate crime despite very obvious proof that it was a hate crime. So that's number one. But of course, while these people continue to be intentionally dishonest about what even happened here, they're simultaneously, this is why I say shameless, standing on their moral high horse. First of all, not sticking up for Catholics, not sticking up for Christians, not sticking up for the very people, the very children here who were attacked. No, they're instead saying that the real victim here, I kid you not, is the transgender community. And then, of course, simultaneously turning around to either blame or mock Christians for their religious beliefs, while, of course, they're the ones here getting attacked. They're the ones here who are the victim of an unprecedented rise in hate crimes. And then on top of that, the utter nerve of these people, after everything we know that frankly doesn't fit any of their social narratives, to turn around on top of that and say, no, the real problem here is not just guns, but Republicans for not passing gun control, which they somehow, some way believe would have stopped this, despite the fact that they have no evidence or proof what gun law would have actually prevented any of this. And this is, of course, ignoring the fact that, as we pointed out in our first video on this subject, this shooting, of course, took place in Tim Walz's state, where he has implemented heavy and strict gun control policies, the very ones that Democrats claim will just, in a utopian sense, save everything. We're not going to have any more shootings if we have gun control. As well as, by the way, the very red flag laws that Tim Walz in the past has touted and celebrated, and yet somehow, despite the massive social media warnings of this shooter, failed to stop him, right? All of it. They're running around changing the blame, refusing to be honest about it, and then saying it's our fault that our people are getting shot at. Utterly disgusting individuals. So in today's video, I want to walk you through that, right? I want to show you the mainstream media, like CNN, for instance, refusing to, first of all, by the way, these people claim to be journalists, right? The most trusted name in news, right? Jake Tapper tries to present himself as this independent, center-of-the-line person, yet him and his guests cannot acknowledge in plain, simple words the basic fact. Yes, indeed, the shooter was a transgender, first of all. Then after that, when it becomes undeniable that the shooter was a transgender, we of course see Democrat politicians, as well as Jen Psaki, going out and saying that, oh, well, the real victims, the real people we need to be worried about right now are the transgender community. No concern for the Catholic children who are getting attacked in the streets by transgender radicals? Apparently not, right? Apparently not. That's their take on this. And then lastly, we got to bring you the shamelessness of Tim Walz, who is the governor of the state and has already done gun control, saying that, oh no, the problem is gun control, and that's why we need gun control. These people break my brain, but we'll tell you about it. So with that said, guys, before we get into it, you know, we work hard on this channel. If you enjoy our content, make sure you hit that like button down below and subscribe to the channel if you are new. That's the best way to support our work. I would greatly appreciate it. And with that said, I mean, I guess let's just start here. So you, of course, first of all, see out of this Democrat city, the very police chief in Minneapolis, Minnesota, acting pronoun sensitive around, obviously, what here was a transgender shooter. And again, you'll notice a pattern here, right? They're acknowledging, oh, this individual got their name changed, but won't just straight up say, yeah, it was a transgender, right? They're trying to speak in very long, winded, coded sentences, but can't explicitly just say what we obviously all know. So check it out.
A few years ago, I think 2019, the shooter did have their name changed. We can confirm that, yes.
And notice that whenever you watch mainstream media coverage of what happened here, they're just talking, oh, there was a shooting at a school. They're not telling you who the shooter was, what he was motivated by, or the identity of the shooter, right? It's all this weird nonsense. And take a listen here to CNN as they describe this fact, right? A completely 30-second long word salad to explain that the shooter was trans without saying that the shooter was trans because they want to protect an identity here. I mean, take a listen. This is ridiculous.
Another piece of the puzzle as to who the shooter was. The Minneapolis Star Tribune says, according to court records, because there's been some confusion about what the shooter's name was.
Yes.
Robin Westman's mother applied to change her child's name in 2019. It was at one point Robert Paul Westman.
Correct.
But since she identifies as a female and wants her name to reflect that identification, was underage, it's now Robin.
Do you see exactly what I'm saying here? How hard is it to say he was a transgender, even if you want to say they were a transgender? That's what it is. No, instead, look, this individual had her name changed back in 2019 because of the legal fact that she wanted to go by she pronouns and blah, 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 blah. Just say she was transgender or he was transgender, okay? It's not that complicated. But of course, why are they doing this? Because they don't want people to actually know what happened in the shooting or why the shooting happened or what the motive was, right? They're just going to say guns, guns, guns. That's first of all. But of course, it gets even worse because once Democrats, mainstream media pundits, etc., find it impossible to deny this fact and they can't really hide it anymore, take a listen here to the response of that by Minneapolis Mayor Jacob Frey, who has thus far, as we've covered already, has been utterly shameless and disgusting about this. He's already made a big stand against guns, even though, again, you're the mayor of Minneapolis in Minnesota. What gun control laws would have stopped this? They can't answer that question. They're just like, guns, let's pull on people's heartstrings. But take a listen to his response now to the fact that the shooter was a trans because, well, it'll speak for itself. You'll see exactly where we're going. Take a listen.
When you talk about compassion, I don't want to tiptoe around the edge of this, but the shooter's name was in question, the gender of the shooter. No one's really sure what's going on there. 5 years ago it was Robert, then a name change to Robin. Okay, this is being seized.
Okay, I'm going to pause again. That's a very complicated way to say that the shooter was transgender. But notice again, they can't say that. They say the shooter changed their name. That's ridiculous. It was a transgender, okay? All right, keep listening.
All corners, as you can imagine, in all sorts of ways. And you know that, Mayor, and perhaps that's why when you spoke about this so profoundly and powerfully as you are even here now, but when you spoke about this today publicly, you voiced concern for the transgender community, for the community overall. And obviously, you chose to do that in that moment because you thought it was important. And I wanted to give you a chance to say why you felt it was important to do that in that moment.
Obviously, I've heard about the rhetoric and the narrative that is being pushed out, but here's the thing. Anybody that is going to use this as an opportunity to villainize our trans community or any community.
Are you serious? Now, look, I guess it's easy to say that we condemn violence, right? No acts of retaliation. That goes against the Christian ethos, against Christian beliefs, unlike the ideologies of some of these people. So yeah, that's a pretty easy statement to make. But of all of the priorities you could pick right now, you go and stand up for the trans community, but not the Catholic children, not Christians as a whole, who are the victims here. Can you imagine if the roles were reversed, right? Imagine a Catholic extremist commits a hate crime against transgender people. Do you think you'd hear any rhetoric in that moment by Democrat politicians saying, look, we feel bad for the victims, but we need to consider our Catholic community right now. We need to not villainize the Catholic community. Yeah, I think we know the answer there, and the answer is obviously no. Now, that said, far from this, you've heard even worse rhetoric. The very people who are mocking the fact that it was Catholic children here who got attacked, you know, saying that, oh, where's your prayers now? They're praying. How dare you pray in the wake of something like this? Disgusting people. When, by the way, I mean, you could say it, right? A member of the left, in some sense or another, goes and attacks our people. They say, oh, well, screw you, religious people. How dare... Really? But anyways, you've seen a lot of this. But I think the prime example comes from none other than MSNBC, or I guess MS Now, soon to be Jen Psaki, who breaks down in tears here and goes on this crazy rant about how, how dare you pray about this, you stupid Christians, the transgender people are the real victims. All these sentiments are expressed here. So just take a listen. These people are just disgusting.
And all they should be hoping to do is have someone to sit with at lunch or someone to play with on the playground. And they should be waiting to hear an update when they get home. And that is not what these parents at the school experience today. Sorry, this is a tough one. Having your child killed while they are sitting in a pew for a morning prayer service is not what any parent should have to worry about. And I have felt a mixture of anger and a lot of anger and emotional exhaustion about this today, as I'm sure many of you have, because we have been here so many times. And yet again, like clockwork, half of the politicians in our country have little more to offer than thoughts and prayers. That is all they are offering. Join all of us in praying for the victims, was Vice President J.D. Vance's response today. That's what he said. That's it. Please join me in praying for everyone involved, Trump wrote. We have seen this play out over and over again. There is a shooting, then come the thoughts and prayers, and then comes the attempt to shift the focus. This is what always happens. You're going to start seeing narratives. You're already seeing them. They're already out there about how the shooter was trans. You're going to see narratives about how the shooter appeared to be anti-Trump and anti-Semitic and clearly was in the midst of a mental health crisis. There's no question about that. But here's the thing. There are trans people all over the world. There are anti-Semitic people, unfortunately, all over the world. And people filled with plenty of political hate all over the world. And mental health issues are not unique to the United States. And yes, we should do more to address them.
But you're about to argue for gun control. Actually, that's implicitly what you've been arguing. But you're acknowledging there's bad people all over the world. So how would your little gun law stop it? We'll get more into that in a second. But already thus far, right, she's saying the right-wingers are shifting the blame by bringing up the very motive that drove this mass shooting and investigating right now, but all but likely hate crime, right? And yet, what are liberals doing right now? Shifting the blame to guns. That's actually maybe where the right-wing argument here came from, because immediately every Democrat in the world is saying, it's the guns, it's the guns. Of course, interestingly, as they say, oh, you guys don't have solutions to this. You guys only have thoughts and prayers. Okay, I asked the left wing then, what's your solution? They're going to say gun control. Okay, but I'm going to say this again. Be specific. Exactly what gun control law is it, and how would it have stopped this mass shooting? They can't answer the question. Because the very gun control laws they've been big proponents of have been passed in Minnesota by Tim Walz, the Democrat governor, your beloved VP, the amazing, relatable dad from 2024. And yet, despite red flag gun laws, despite extensive background checks and all this stuff that you claim doesn't exist in America because you know nothing about the actual gun laws, this one still slipped through the cracks. So explain that to me. What gun control law specifically would have stopped this in a Democrat state ran by your people, and yet this stuff still happens? Does that not vindicate our argument that actually the gun control doesn't work? That bad people will still do bad things? And you say we only have thoughts and prayers? No, we have a solution as well. We've been calling for it for years. The right wing has. It's called school safety. There should be armed guards in every school, whether that's police officers or a security guard or something. That should be the case. That is something, by the way, I would happily spend my tax dollars on through federal funding to make sure every school in this country is fortified. That is true. But it is Democrats for years who, by the way, have opposed that. They say that's the militarization of the schools, or that's over-policing. It makes people feel unsafe, right? That's actually the real solution, because as you see in this case right now, even with gun control, things fall through the cracks. So what do you ultimately need, right? When push comes to shove, when you're faced with a bad guy, okay? Is some law that the bad guy got around ever going to save you or stop it? No. You know what it is? You having a way to respond. And armed security, police on site, right? That's the fighting chance that the children of this country actually need, okay? It's a very direct A to B solution. It's not this idea that, hey, if we do this gun control, maybe the criminal won't get it. Okay, what if the criminal does get it? What if they buy it illegally from Mexico? Then what do you do then? You know? So you don't break down in tears in front of me and talk all about your human empathy and how these people lack it, because you guys only have thoughts and prayers. We have action. You don't have action, though. You already took the action. It still happened. So, as a matter of fact, the thoughts and prayers, according to your standards, because I believe prayer goes far, but according to your standards, are actually doing just as much right now as your gun control laws in Tim Walz's Minnesota. Just some food for thought. And an utterly disgusting sentiment, by the way, to mock the idea of prayer, considering how the shooting especially happened. You see the response here from J.D. Vance, who responds to Jen Psaki, saying that we pray because our hearts are broken. We pray because we know God listens. We pray because we know that God works in mysterious ways and can inspire us to further action. Why do you feel the need to attack other people for praying when kids were just killed praying? Exactly. He goes on here to state that of all the weird left-wing culture wars in the last few years, this is by far the most bizarre. Quote, how dare you pray for people in the midst of tragedy? What are you even talking about? Good answer. Good response. But again, these people are vile. And of course, while they say that, oh, the real victim here is the transgender community, stop villainizing them or whatever, it's worth noting, too, by the way, that since 2018, according to FBI data, attacks on Catholic and Christian churches have surged a whopping 730%. Yet apparently, they're not the victims here. They're not the people that we should be holding hands with or sticking up for, according to the left.
A growing problem in the United States, with the number of hostile attacks against Christians skyrocketing. Just last year, there were 415 incidents, which is a 730% increase just since 2018.
But let's go on live TV and shed tears for the trans community instead. Apparently so. Of course, these people get even more vile and ridiculous. I know this video is exhausting. I know this video is probably enraging most of our viewers. But I have to show you what's being said. Because even today, a guest goes on CNN and states the following, saying that calling the Minneapolis, you know what happened there, a hate crime is, quote, a far-right narrative. It's just a conspiracy theory. It's just a random mass shooting. Despite the fact, again, this is a trans radical, has a whole manifesto, writes you know what on the guns, attacks a Catholic school, which there's an obvious connection to. It's far-right conspiracy theory if you believe this was a targeted attack against Catholics or Christians.
Well, this gets a little nuanced, and I teach a class on this in Georgetown. This individual appears to be what we call a nihilist. And not to get into too much detail about their ideology, they believe that no lives matter. I believe that calling this or investigating this as an attack against Catholics, I believe, is a little disingenuous, and it plays into the far right's narrative about Christians being under attack in this country. Clearly, since this person went to this school, it appears to be, and we don't know their background. But I think that we're starting to see the creepings of the politicization of this tragedy, and you'll start seeing that more and more. I've already seen that online from some lawmakers. But with that said, I appreciate any hate crime to be investigated as an act of domestic terrorism, so long as it's within the scopes and the reasonability of the law, and it really meets the purposes of what we're looking to do in terms of the investigation.
Really? Oh, but you were the former DC Chief of Homeland Security and Intelligence. You're a professor at Georgetown. You have all these credentials. We ought to just sit there and listen to you, shouldn't we? Okay, first of all, nihilism is still an ideology. And if that's what you're trying to attribute to all of this, ironically, I don't see how that benefits your case, because I personally, at least, would make the argument that nihilism is a left-wing ideology, right? It's the end result of a lot of left-wing or progressive ideas, chief among them perhaps being the belief in atheism or blanket secularism or all of those things, combined many things others, right? But ultimately, most leftists at the end of the tunnel become nihilists. So I don't understand the argument, first of all. But, you're further here saying that, oh, well, they hated Catholics, he hated Catholics. But if he hated everyone, therefore it shouldn't be a hate crime. Hey, you read the word hate crime, right? It wasn't targeted. Surely it was just a random act of violence, guys. Okay. So, and by the way, if you even suspect it might be a hate crime, you're playing into the far right narrative, guys. I don't even know what to say at this point. Furthermore, it gets more ridiculous because we got to bring you back to the argument about gun control, right? So they're blaming everything in the book besides the obvious, okay? They're saying this was the impact of nihilism, apparently, and it's not a hate crime, actually. They're about to actually show you some more ridiculous stuff here. But first, here is Governor Tim Walz, of course, saying, keep us in your thoughts and prayers, but also keep us in your thoughts for action. This is the talking point and slogan you keep hearing. Except I again ask the question, Tim Walz, what action? You're the governor of the freaking state. What's the action? Why didn't you do it? Oh, you did do it. It didn't work. Okay? So amidst all this virtue signaling at us, while, of course, Catholic children got shot at by a left-wing radical in some way, shape, or another, right? Because we know the path he went down. No. Trust me, guys, they're going to take action, right? You also see similarly from Minneapolis mayor here, Jacob Frey, who is obviously going massively for gun control. He's saying we need an assault weapons ban and all of this. Except as you can see, and again, these are the people who apparently are on their moral high horses, has absolutely no clue what he's talking about. He doesn't even know how guns work, okay? Take a listen to this quote. So, we have these assault rifles that can reel off 30 clips in conjunction with a magazine before the person needs to reload. 30 clips. That's what you shoot out of your gun. Clips, apparently. Okay, take a listen.
Have more guns in America than we have people. The reality is that we have these assault rifles that can reel off 30 clips in conjunction with a magazine before the person even needs to reload. The reality is that these guns make their way into cities across America by the trunk.
It ought to be a serious question. How can you make or propose legislation about something that you literally know nothing about? Like, that's insanity. For instance, I don't know anything about, let's think of some random thing. Plumbing, right? Local ordinances, civil engineering. You could never make me go and write a regulation in a city government about here's how you have to lay the pipes, or here's how you can handle rainwater and all this stuff. You know why? Because I don't know anything about it. That would be insane to put me in that position. And yet here you have a guy who thinks you shoot clips out of a magazine of a gun. He thinks that's how it works. And these people are saying, listen, we know how guns work. We know everything about this issue. You need to trust us and listen to our answers on legislation. Utter insanity, okay? So while these people, of course, again, refuse to even acknowledge that the person is transgender who did this, you have them simultaneously acting like these big know-it-alls and saying, hey, Republicans, you're so evil because you don't want gun control. And then, of course, when Republicans ask, okay, first of all, what gun control? They have no idea. They don't even know how this stuff works, right? And then secondly, when I ask the question, how could gun control have stopped this when it already took place in Tim Walz's Minnesota? They don't know. He's like, gun control. And then, of course, simultaneously, right, they call you a bad person. This is always the strategy. Just call you a bad or evil person for not supporting everything they believe, even though they can't define what they believe. And then let's just shut down the conversation by declaring everything a human right, declaring everyone who disagrees with us Nazi or immoral or hates children or something, and boom. That's what you're seeing, right? Of course, it gets even more ridiculous. Last thing we'll show you here, because again, as I'm talking about here, they continue to blame everything besides the obvious. Here's an MSNBC guest that says the Minnesota shooting might have been radicalized, not by a certain ideology. What could have radicalized him, right? No. Clearly, it was the effects of COVID. Yeah, that must be it. which maybe even on the mental health front, there's a legitimate argument about. But then does that not further prove that, if that was all true, that the lockdowns were a terrible and devastating idea while you guys supported them, of course? I don't know, but here's again, them making any excuse besides the obvious.
Did they help motivate him and radicalize him to carry out this shooting?
When you use the word radicalize, we tend to think of terror, a more traditional terrorist, something that people came, especially in this country, to seem to be familiar with in the post 9/11 era, right? So when you talk about radicalization, you talk about writings that reference suicide, extremely violent thoughts and ideas, and those multiple videos that are posted online. What do these groups do when you say they radicalize?
So, whether it's a terrorist organization or the variety of ideologies that different people follow. They're following them because they have susceptibility. There's various push-pull factors. Maybe it's some kind of mental break. Maybe it's their life has gone down the toilet and they have no hope. Maybe they have bad parenting, a variety of things. The effects of COVID and the isolation and what's called the gamification influence, where young men are growing up being raised by video games. All of those things are involved in really people mobilizing towards violence more routinely in these things. But you will also see people get radicalized solely on these video games through headsets. They may never go on the internet otherwise. So there's a variety of things that threat professionals look at now and trends. But we're seeing this repeated.
Oh, here we go again, guys. And even the video games, they're going to throw that in. It's the 1990s all over again, where they say, oh, surely, even though like most kids are playing them, this is what's causing the mass shootings, even though most of us who played video games never did a mass shooting. Yeah, guess what? But okay, so they'll blame that. They'll blame COVID. Won't directly say, hey, maybe left-wing gender ideology could have done this. Hey, maybe the fact that, you have a person on a lot of psychological and brain-changing hormones, which, by the way, you want to talk about gun control. You know what you need control of? Perhaps there's an argument to be made, right? The fact that in almost every mass shooting in the past several decades, the person's on some type of psych meds, right? Hey, how about if those people are taking those meds, maybe they should be banned from having the gun. No, you can't do that. We just need to ban guns for everyone, right? But again, blame everything but the obvious. Sure, okay. Well, with that said, guys, let me know your thoughts on all of this in the comment section down below. I know most of the thoughts are going to be bad, but you know how it goes. Let me know. Be sure to leave a like on this video, subscribe to the channel if you are new, and until next time, God bless and peace.